Morning, everyone. Welcome to Baines Planning Committee, 27th of July. My name is Councillor Sue Craig. I'm Chair of the committee. Can I please remind everyone to switch anything electronic that's going to make a noise or play tunes to silent, please. The meeting is being filmed, so if you don't want to appear in the webinar, the film afterwards, could you please make yourself known to this gentleman behind me in the corner? If I can now ask the Democratic Services Officer to read out the emergency evacuation procedure.
Thank you, Chair. If the continuous alarm sounds, you must evacuate the building by one of the designated exits and proceed to the named assembly point. The designated exits are signposted. From this room, you will use the main door and then the main exit of the building. If this exit is blocked, you can use the exit on your right into Guildhall Market. The assembly point for this building is in Orange Grove on the green outside Browns. Arrangements are in place for the safe evacuation of disabled people.
Thank you, Karina. And could we have any apologies for absence and substitutions, please?
Yes, apologies from Councillor Lucy Hodge, and Councillor Matt McCabe is substituting.
Thank you. And I should mention that Councillor Simmons is on his way. He's been delayed. Obviously, if he arrives after the start of an application, then he won't take part in any of the debate or vote on that application. But we are expecting him shortly. Item 3, do we have any declarations of interest, please? Councillor McCabe.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's been pointed out that the first application is from the council, and as a cabinet assistant, I am therefore in a difficult position, so I will abstain from voting.
Okay, thank you. And also from taking part in the debate. Thank you. Item 4, there's no urgent business agreed by the Chair. Item 5, if I could ask Karina again to speak and inform us about the public speaking procedure today.
Thank you, Chair. Speakers will be called to speak immediately after the case officer has made their presentation about the application. The order of speakers and the time allowed for speaking will be as follows. If there's any parish and town councillors, they will speak first for 3 minutes. Objectors will speak for 3 minutes, and supporters will speak for a total of 3 minutes. If there's more than one objector or supporter, they must share the time between them. Ward councillors not on the committee who have indicated they wish to speak may do so for a maximum of 5 minutes. Speeches will be timed by the traffic light system you can see on the table next to me. At the start, the light will be green, will turn to amber when there's 1 minute of speaking time remaining. When the light turns red, speakers should immediately conclude their remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Karina. Item 6, minutes from the 29th of June. Do we have any comments, or can I have someone to propose that they are accurate? Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of small alterations, if you don't mind. Page 10, near the bottom, point 1, it says 2 subterranean structures to complement. I think it means bent. The I needs to be changed to an E. And then on the following page, page 11, Midsummer, there is no connection to the Midsummer murders. It should be Midsummer Norton, not just Midsummer. we don't want that confusion, I'm sure. Apart from that, I'm happy to propose that these are a correct record, although I would like to raise a question about content, if we're happy with the...
Okay, thank you. Before we do that, could I just have someone to second if they're happy with those changes? Councillor Crossley. I'll sign those shortly. Back to Councillor Jackson. Yes, you had a comment to make.
Thank you. It's application 21/029373/out, this Midsummer Norton one. I was not present during the debate, but the minutes indicate that there was a request for more information before the committee could take a decision on this application, and I had thought it was going to come back to this meeting. Can we have an update?
Yes, certainly, Councillor Jackson. Perhaps I could turn to a senior planning officer on my left here for that.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. Yes, the application at Silver Street in Midsummer Norton was deferred at the last meeting. It was deferred specifically to enable officers to explore all possible options for the provision of a pedestrian crossing over the road. Those discussions are continuing. From when the previous committee took place until the agenda needs to be put together for the next committee is only a period of around 2 to 3 weeks. So in terms of actual time that officers have had to fully explore those options, the time has been limited. So it hasn't quite reached a point yet where officers have fully explored those options. The key issues really are whether the developer provides that crossing or whether the council provides that crossing with a contribution from the developer. So those discussions are ongoing, and it's very likely that it will be at the next meeting of the planning committee with those issues resolved. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Perhaps if it isn't, then you could give us an update on how things are going at the next meeting, but hopefully we'll see it come up there. Is that okay, Councillor Jackson? Good. Site visit list, we didn't have any for this meeting, so we'll move straight to the main plans list, and the first item is a pipe bridge adjacent to Windsor Bridge. If I could invite the case officer to present his report. If you're ready, please.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, this is item 1 on the agenda, which is the demolition of a redundant gas pipeline bridge and associated public realm works and landscaping works on Windsor Bridge Road in Bath. So we can see the site here outlined in red, and it's adjacent to Windsor Bridge, the modern Windsor Bridge, which has the car traffic, and obviously spans the River Avon with Kingsmead Ward to the north and Westmoreland to the south, so it actually spans both wards. The site does fall within the World Heritage Site. Half of the site is within the conservation area as well, the Bath Conservation Area, the boundary of which runs along the south bank of the river. So everything to the north of the southern bank of the river is within the conservation area. The River Avon itself is a site of a nature conservation interest, and there is the towpath that runs along the northern side of the site of the river is a public right of way. Moving on to the aerial photograph, just to the west of the site we have Windsor Castle and other residential properties there. Immediately to the south of the site is the stable yard, sort of industrial businesses and estate. I'm trying to, here we go, here's my cursor, this area here. And then we've got the old gas holder voids from the old gas holders that were on the Bath Western Riverside site, which is now part of a residential allocation. And also worth noting, Locksbrook Bridge, which is a redundant railway bridge just to the west, which I'll return to a bit later. But for the purposes of this application, this is the former pipe bridge, or the existing pipe bridge, sorry, which is just to the west of the the existing road bridge. So some more close-up photos here. You can see it's a bowstring girder bridge, and you can see the girders here, and the main span of the bridge crossing the river here, with the properties on Windsor Castle to the rear here. You can also note how there have been some modifications to this bridge over time, and I'll come on to those in more detail in a moment, but the trusses, the main sort of steel supports, are encased in concrete as part of repair works that were taking place in the past, and that's now become a bit of an issue. As you can see from some of these photographs, there's an awful lot of corrosion, rust and damage to the bridge as we see it from all sort of different angles. And you can see that it currently serves no purpose other than to provide support for this pipe, which is the gas pipe, which is now no longer functionally required following gas rationalisation work that's taken place on the Western Riverside site, and a new pipe has been put in underneath the more modern Windsor Bridge. And then this is just a view of the northern approach span and landing area. So you can see it's where the access to the towpath comes down from Upper Bristol Road, which is this alley here. It's quite dark, it's quite sort of cut off, and there's limited visibility for pedestrians and cyclists accessing the towpath. This is a view of that access route from Upper Bristol Road and the Windsor Bridge Junction. So looking back, you'll note the trees here, which I'll get a better view of in a moment. And then this is just underneath in that area. So this is a sort of gravel track which links to that public right-of-way. Actually, and this is one of the original piers for the original bridge. It was built back in 1837, but it actually cuts off visibility for those trying to access onto the towpath. Just coming back to those trees, so there's 3 large lime trees on the corner here of the junction. They're quite visually significant, act as sort of landmarks in this area. These would have to be removed as part of the proposals, but I'll come on to that in a bit more detail in a moment, but just so you can see what they look like. And then coming back to the history of the site, so as I said, the original bridge in this location was a suspension bridge. This is a sort of artist impression of what it looked like back in 1837, and it was the main bridge between sort of Twerton and Westmoreland. In 1894, most of this was sort of demolished, and it was replaced with the bowstring girder bridge, which is currently there at the moment. The piers, obviously the area shown green here, were retained, and that's what the girder bridge sits on. And then there was also a section of wall along here that was part of the original bridge as well. And then there were some later modifications that happened on the southern landing. The southern landing is much more contemporary. So the application proposes to demolish the majority of the bridge. You can see the areas hashed here would be the areas that would be demolished. So most of the northern landing and approach span, the main span, the southern span, but retaining the southern pier, the southern historic pier. And part of the reason for that is because of the fact it is now redundant, and also the extremely poor condition that the bridge is in. Page 30 of the committee report provides a summary of some of the faults that have been investigated and examined on the existing bridge, and there's a significant amount of corrosion and cracking and invasive vegetation and failings in the bridge, which have led to an examination of, well, what to do about the bridge, what do we do with it, and lots of different options have been considered, including a do-nothing option, which would be to leave the bridge as it is and do nothing, but given the level of the faults that have been identified, the bridge would quickly become a health and safety risk, with the possibility of bits falling off into the river or onto the towpath. A second option considered is repair and refurbishment. Now, given the extent of the damage and disrepair, it's been identified that this would have to be a major program of refurbishment, and that would carry with it a significant cost to the council. There would also be a significant risk of those costs escalating as the full extent of works required couldn't be fully known until further investigation was undertaken as part of those works. And then there would be obviously ongoing maintenance costs for the bridge, which is, as I said, currently redundant. That's raised a question that has been put by some of the representations received about could the bridge be put to another use? Could it be refurbished and turned into a pedestrian and cycle link, for example, as a way to have a segregated pedestrian and cycle link off the road and as separate from Windsor Bridge? I think here it's worth mentioning there are some limitations to that. The first and most important probably being around the fact that there is no, the council does not own the land down here, and so accessing the southern landing would require compulsory purchase and would sterilise an otherwise thriving sort of little business estate, and that would obviously present its challenges. And then you would also have to connect to the wider network, you would have to be able to cross Windsor Bridge, and there's no obvious cross Windsor Bridge Road, and there's no obvious connection points here. And then this plan I've included following some questions that were received at briefing, which is about the council do actually already have a strategy to provide active travel crossings across the river at in this location. So just to orientate yourselves, here's the bridge we're talking about, the Windsor Bridge. And I mentioned before Locksbrook Bridge, which is in this location here. This has been examined by the council and is considered to be structurally sound and is on what is safeguarded as a sustainable transport route, which is part of the development plan. And that includes it's going to include a pedestrian cycle link all the way through here across the bridge. There's a route through the Chivers House site that's been secured through the Section 106 agreement. There's the possibility of a new crossing over Windsor Bridge Road in this location, which is part of the current planning policy and is being strengthened in the local plan partial update. And then there's a route that would go through the emerging Western Riverside development, which is being jointly developed by St William and the council, and then continues on Stubber Avenue through to the city centre. So with all that in mind, those sort of do nothing or repair it options are of limited value or not particularly feasible. And so the option that has been progressed is looking at demolishing the bridge. With that comes some negatives and downsides, such as the loss of trees that would have to occur to enable the working areas to take down the bridge safely. Because of the poor condition of the bridge, they essentially would have to put in a temporary support structure, a temporary span to support the bridge whilst it's taken apart. And to get the working area to put that in, the 3 lime trees up here would have to be removed, and a number of trees, totaling 13 in total, would have to be removed from the southern side of the river. That number has been reduced from 18 as that's stated in the committee report, and you see in the update report some further detailed work has been done, and the number of tree removals has been reduced. But I think the important point here is that in any option, so any option of do nothing, which as I said is not feasible, or refurbishment, to refurbish the bridge to this level would entail a similar degree of temporary works and working area, which would likely result in a similar number of tree removals. So that should just be in your mind on this. However, it's important to note this is not just an application for the bridge demolition. It is accompanied by a scheme of public realm improvements. Whilst there would be some tree losses, the proposals do include tree replacements in accordance with our policy. So that's a significant number of on-site tree replacements, but there isn't sufficient room to enable all of the necessary on-site replacements to be provided on this site. And so there is a condition, I believe it's condition 13, 12, which requires a site to be found along the river line to accommodate those additional replacement trees. And we've had confirmation from the Green Infrastructure team in charge of the Ribline project that they are confident they'll be able to find a site for that, which will enable tree replacements on the river line, so in a similar environment to those that are being lost. And then in terms of the public realm improvements, the removal of the pier allows for the opening up of this access onto the public right-of-way. There's obviously new planting, new trees, new steps down from Windsor Bridge Road, new surfacing materials. Currently it's gravel and can get quite muddy in inclement weather. It makes the route more legible and for pedestrians and cyclists, and improves the visibility of those accessing the public right-of-way. And it's consistent essentially with the aims of the current Riverline project, which aims to improve the quality and the environments along the Riverline, including the creation of small pocket parks, etc. So just got some more, these are illustrative details of the proposals for the public realm works. So this is an existing section on the north landing area. So you can see opening up, knocking the wall down here, including some more planting, replacement trees, and then some more sort of visualizations, as it were, of what that space could look like. And then this is up on the junction of the Upper Bristol Road and Windsor Bridge Road. There's an opportunity to provide some historic interpretation boards on the end here to outline, the history of the bridge, and as part of the recommendation, there's historic building recording of the bridge, so that there'll be able to be records entered on the historic environment record. Opportunities for cycle parking as well, and then a sensitive lighting scheme for this area at night time because of the ecology issues around the proximity to the river. And then that's just a final sort of overview slide there of the proposals. So the application is recommended for approval, and I'm happy to take any questions after the speakers. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, we have one speaker on this. If I could invite Chris Beaver to come to the front. Button on the right. The button on the right. It's not working either. And, right, the trouble with you speaking loudly is you won't be able to be heard on the recording, whilst we'll be able to hear you, probably without you speaking loudly, but it's a problem for the recording. If you could just bear with us a moment, we'll try and get you a mic that does work. Do you want to take mine or yours? Yeah. Okay.
That's what the problem was. That's your fault. Okay, Right, third time lucky. Right. Okay, yeah, thank you, councillors. Yes, we are appointed as planning consultants by the council to manage this planning application proposal and it's been the subject of considerable liaison with Chris Griggs and other consultees, and I think we've settled on a very, very good proposal. So by way of background, the proposal's linked to the gas rationalisation project, which is nearing completion, and that in turn is a sort of forms part of a major public intervention in regeneration scheme that will indirectly assist the delivery of 1,000 homes on Bath Western Riverside 2, which is subject of a development plan allocation. As Chris has mentioned, the bridge is inaccessible and is now functionally redundant following the completion of these works. So it serves no beneficial purpose in its current condition. It is not listed and has been significantly adapted and modified over time and bears little resemblance to what it was originally. Its sort of setting has been sort of compromised by the larger scale Windsor Bridge, which was constructed in the early 1970s, I understand. Independent engineering advice has confirmed that if the bridge is not removed, the sort of do nothing scenario, as Chris has said, I'll just re-emphasise this point, it would still require major works to just keep it in its present condition, which would clearly be a cost liability for the council going forward, and arguably would not be a good use of public money. Under that scenario, any repair to the bridge would still require the similar level of tree removal as well. The trees have been subject to quite a bit of debate, and the project team have worked hard to do as much replacement on site, but because of the constricted nature of the site, there will have to be an element of off-site planting as well. The removal of the bridge does create a very significant public realm betterment opportunity, and it will also improve the amenity and outlook of the adjacent Windsor Bridge flats, which were constructed sort of 20 years ago or so. The gravel path that connects down from the Upper Bristol Road is in poor condition, and there's a pinch point with two blind corners at the southern extent where it meets the towpath. This causes a significant conflict between users, and our position is that by opening up the southern aspect of the path and improving access to Upper Bristol Road, it will resolve these pinch points and improve user safety and also enhance connectivity, and it will contribute positively to the wider Bath Riverline project for both pedestrians and cycles.
Yeah, if you could bring your comments to close, please. Sorry, your microphone's gone off. This is quite good, actually. My microphone's on. I can switch anyone else's off, so if I don't like what you're saying. Thank you very much. Right, questions to the case officer. Anybody got any? Councillor Crossley?
Yeah, I wonder if you could just explain a bit more about the mitigation for the pipistrelle bats, because it's not completely clear to me how that's going to work, because the mitigation talks about within 12 months of completion. So if the bats lose their home on day one, surely some sort of preparation should be done before day one for it. So could you give us a bit more information about the bats?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Councillor Crossley. So the bat mitigation proposals have been reviewed carefully by the Council's own ecologists and by Natural England as well. Now, there is obviously this requirement for some off-site replacement, but there is also on-site replacement. That does include habitat replacement. The general principle is when there is loss of habitat is to try and replace that as soon as possible. In this instance, obviously, the landscaping that would go back in on-site would be done shortly after the bridge works are complete. The off-site provision, there had to be a balance struck there between giving enough time to find an alternative site and obviously ensuring it does happen within a reasonable time frame. That 12 months has been agreed with the Council of Ecologists as being a reasonable time frame. As I said, there is mitigation going back in on the site, so it's not that their bats are without any replacement habitat during that time.
Okay, Councillor Crossley. Councillor Bromley.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chris. My question is really about the trees. You know, seeing in the description of the application, the trees to be removed was 18 and it's dropped down to 13. I just wondered where you've managed to save some and if it's possible to save a few more, and especially regarding those 3 lovely lime trees, because anybody who regularly drives up and down Bristol Road, they are such a landmark, and for everybody it must be sort of quite heartbreaking that they would have to be removed. Is there any other point of access that could be used to prevent that happening?
Thank you, Councillor Bromley. So in respect of the ones that were sort of managed to be sort of saved, as it were, it's largely these ones down here. The working area has been able to be reduced. I think it is saving some of these here. I agree with you regarding the value of those lime trees. They're obviously significant trees, and it is a huge shame to see them go. In terms of there has been a review of not just alternative scenarios, but also alternative demolition methodologies, alternative demolition methodologies, which have been reviewed and they're set out in the committee report, such as bringing a barge in with lifting equipment, but you still need to do works on land, and so that entails a working area again, and there's practical difficulties with doing that, and you would have to close the river for navigation for an extended period of time. So obviously that's a significant point. There was an option reviewed about putting a large crane on Windsor Bridge itself. Now that the loadings on Windsor Bridge prevent certain types of certain weights of crane going on there, that would obviously have a significant impact in terms of road closures and the network for an extended period. And again, you would still need to strengthen the key point here is you still need to strengthen that bridge because it's in such a poor state. Essentially, whatever method you do, you need to support it whilst you take it apart. And to do that, you need to slide in. This is the technical advice I've received, that you would need to essentially slide in a temporary span to support it so that the bridge would sit on that while you take it apart. And to do that, to get that in, essentially you need to come in from the north side. There's not really, you can't really do it from the south side for technical reasons. And that does entail the loss of these to get that working area, and that's the independent engineering advice that we've received, unfortunately.
Okay, Councillor Davis.
Thank you. Sort of carrying on from the trees, when you showed the existing and then the what it could look like with the trees, and I can see in condition 12 you've written down about planting sizes. Can we be assured that where it says about planting sizes, they will be quite as large as the ones that you're looking at replacing? Because if you look at this screen you've got there now, with my back to it, I can't see, they do look what you're going to put in quite large, but can we be assured that what you're going to do, or what the condition states, will cover that? I say I can clearly see it says planting sizes, but just want reassurance, please.
Yes, of course, Councillor Davis. Obviously, we're not going to be able to, the council are not going to be able to put back in the same size trees from day one as are being taken out, but certainly we'll be looking for species that can grow to similar sizes and to be planting large specimens, not just whips, so that that they get to those sizes as quickly as possible. Officers will ensure that those details that come through the landscaping conditions will make sure that they meet those objectives when they discharge those conditions.
Okay, Councillor Jackson.
Thank you. I've got 2 queries. The first relates to highways, and we've got this paragraph about the design and access statement. Thinking about the problems that residents have had with the Clevedon Bridge and the Victoria Bridge, I was wondering if we had a sufficiently rigorous traffic management plan in place while this work is going on, and how long it would take, a rough estimate of how long disruption would be likely to last for, because I think that's what our residents would want to know, whether about traffic management. And the other question really relates to this ongoing question of trees, and I will back the line that previous speakers have been taking. It's on page 29, the top paragraph, where the level of harm falls into less than substantial category. Paragraph 202 of the framework is engaged, which states that less than substantial harm should be weighed against the public benefits. Now, we've seen a presentation which has set out very clearly what the public benefits are, but I do have to say that I do feel that the loss of 13 trees, including these mature lime trees and the other environmental damage, is substantial. And I think it should be acknowledged. But I think you could still argue that the public good outweighs the substantial damage. So I wonder if we just have a bit of clarification of where this line falls between substantial, which I think it is, and less than substantial. And finally, what happens if we find a Roman soldier? I mean, they did sort of get buried in the Newbridge Road area in particular. But are there plans in place for a dig if something of significance is discovered?
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. I'll take those questions in turn. In terms of traffic management, the application, as I said in the report, that there will inevitably have to be some traffic management of Windsor Bridge Road, Upper Bristol Road, whilst works are put in place. There is no detail of that, precise detail of that, or how long that will take in the application. As is commonly the case with development proposals, we don't have that sort of level of detail, but there is a condition, I believe it's condition 1 probably, let me just double check. Yeah, condition 2, sorry, which requires a construction management plan to be submitted before any works commence, with details of deliveries, contractor parking, traffic management, working hours, site opening times, wheel wash, site compound arrangements, and measures to control dust. And then, so that there's a level of control there, plus, in addition to that, the council's highways teams and networks teams will, maybe perhaps I should ask Tom to answer the questions around network management and how that's managed.
Yeah, just to sort of add to what Chris has said, really, I think when we've reviewed this, we've recognised that, the demolition works will be located next to a very important part of our network, and that this will need to be carefully considered by the applicant in their construction management plans, and they'll need to, fully consider and propose appropriate management solutions for that development.
And just coming on to your other questions around trees, so you drew attention to a part of my report on page 29, which actually, I'll be very clear, it's in reference to the heritage impacts and the loss of the bridge and the impact upon the significance of the bridge itself as a non-designated heritage asset, the conservation area and the World Heritage Site both as designated heritage assets. I don't think there's any way that the loss of the bridge itself or the loss of the trees could be argued to be impacting on the significance of the bridge, although the bridge going itself is obviously that's the entire loss of that non-designated asset, so that's quite significant, but it is only a non-designated asset. It's not a designated asset such as a conservation area or World Heritage Site. In terms of where the level is and whether something substantial or less than substantial harm to the conservation area or the World Heritage Site, advice I'd give there is that substantial is a very high bar. It's almost to say that the significance of that asset has almost completely been drained away. Not totally necessarily, but almost completely. And so in this case, we're talking about two designated assets, the Bath Conservation Area, and I don't think you could say that the removal of these 3 trees, whilst harmful, wouldn't drain away the entire significance of the conservation area or even come close to that. So that's why we've concluded that's less than substantial harm. Similarly, with the World Heritage Site, those 3 trees, whilst they do make a contribution possibly to the character of the World Heritage Site, they're not, their loss wouldn't remove all the significance of the World Heritage Site. So that hopefully gives you an idea. We're acknowledging there is some harm, but it doesn't reach that level of substantial. And then the final question around archaeology, there is a condition requiring, I believe it's an archaeological watching brief. I'll just double check. Yeah, a watching brief in condition 4. So if anything, any remains will be identified as part of that.
Okay, Councillor Jackson.
Yes, that's fine. I'm sorry I coalesced the tree issue, the ecology and the impact on a heritage site together into one thought. But I hope that the archaeology watching brief is not just watching, that should something be found, appropriate action will be taken.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Crossley, you had another question?
Yeah, sorry, and it's to do with costs, and I've got no problem with your estimate based on what we did with the Victoria Bridge, if we were bringing it up to full public use type of work. And I remember when we made the decision, what was 15, 20 years ago now on Victoria Bridge, we had 3 options, and we decided to go to the full restoration rather than the 2 cheaper options. So before we make this decision to demolish, have you looked at a cheaper option of perhaps just refurbing the bit over the footpath to get rid of the danger of things falling onto people walking on that footpath? Or have you just, is the only one you've considered the full restoration option?
Thank you, Councillor Crossley. So the applicant team, the information that's been submitted with the application has just, the way that they've put it is that the bridge has already reached a stage where routine maintenance and those sort of small-scale interventions are not likely to be enough to secure the bridge. The option that they've looked at, retain and refurbish, that doesn't include, to my knowledge, that doesn't include sort of reopening that bridge as a pedestrian or cycleway or anything like that. They're very much ballpark figures. They're not. I'm not going to place too much reliance on those figures. And obviously, you could scope it. You could probably scope it slightly down to do only the bare essentials. But there is still likely to be a significant cost associated, given the level of defects. And also, there's this element of risk, which I think is important to acknowledge, which is that until the scale of activities that are required, you won't know until you've properly investigated the structure, which would only happen once you start doing works, because you've got those steel beams are encased in concrete, and so you're not going to know the exact condition until you get through that. So there is a significant risk that costs could escalate from any estimate as well. So that would just be my sort of answer to your question there, Councillor Crossley.
Okay, and Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Eleanor. Thank you. I've got a couple of very quick questions. Could I have a look at that slide where you showed the crossing, the proposed cycleway over Locksbrook? So I understand then what you're saying there. You're going to open the bridge, which is basically an east to west pathway. Realistically, I'm not sure, is that going to really solve the problem of cycle traffic going over Midland Bridge? Because I understand it's east to west, but a lot of the traffic, particularly from the new developments like the Bath Press and Dick Lovett's, and those are going to want to go north-south. So won't we still have an issue on Midland Bridge with a lot of cycle traffic from that? Or is there another bridge that further down that's going to provide that access across?
Yeah, so Councillor Hughes, I have had some information from the Transport Policy Manager who's been looking at the sort of strategic plans for walking and cycling in the area, and as well as the Locksbrook Bridge, which, yeah, I agree, looks to serve a mainly east-west direction. They've also got the bridge which is sort of shown north-south on the Midland Bridge, thanks Chris, yeah, with a yellow line on the plan. And there is also an aspiration to provide a segregated cycling route on Windsor Bridge Road, as I understand it. So that would be without this bridge.
Okay, thank you. And one second question, it's a very simple question. So if we remove this bridge, we're going to expose Windsor Bridge, which isn't the most attractive of bridges on our river. So is there any plans for any remedial work or to do anything with the Windsor Bridge to make it more attractive?
There's no plans as part of this application. I'm not aware of any proposals to do anything further to Windsor Bridge other than what my colleagues just commented about segregated cycleways and things.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions from my colleagues here? I have a quick question, Chris. Sorry if you covered this in your presentation, but there are concerns of people who live in Windsor Castle about overlooking, because they're a bit protected at the moment by this bridge. I wonder if you could just cover that off, please.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Councillor Craig. Yes, we have had a number of comments from those living in Windsor Castle, which if you just look to the left-hand image here, you can see some of the sort of short balconies and windows along this area here. Removal of the bridge, I've actually had comments sort of both ways. Some have said that actually by removing the bridge, you're opening up their outlook because there's no longer a structure that's as close to their property. Others obviously have a preference for privacy and feel that the structure offers them privacy. However, I've looked at the views that would be attained carefully from Windsor Bridge, compare them to the views that you would obtain from the towpath, which is directly outside these windows as well. And actually there would be no real significant loss of privacy as a result of the removal of the bridge, given the angle that you would be viewing it from, the fact that they're facing onto the public realm in any case. So those are not private windows in the sense that they are sort of tucked around the back of somewhere. And so in that context, whilst there may be some angles at which you get a slightly greater view, it's not a significant impact in terms of privacy or loss of privacy. And the distances between Windsor Bridge and Windsor Castle properties is actually large enough that it's not going to be, there's not going to be any element of direct overlooking.
Sorry, could I just correct something that I said on the north-south crossing for Councillor Hughes' benefit? I actually misread the plans for Windsor Bridge Road, and it says a grade separated crossing of Windsor Bridge Road rather than a route across the length of it. So I think that's over the road rather than over the river.
Okay, thank you. So no more questions? Okay, so we can move to the debate. This is actually in my ward. Well, one end of it is. So I'll listen to the debate with interest. All the questions that have been asked, similar concerns. I think particularly the loss of those 3 lime trees is a real shame. But I do understand that we do have either other cycle paths available and we all know what's happened with Cleveland Bridge, with once you start repairing something and how it can snowball. So I do also understand all the concerns around that issue as well. So I'll be interested to hear what the rest of my colleagues on the committee think. Councillor Housel, you had your hand up, I think.
Let's try again. Can you hear? Okay. Right. After hearing the presentation and the questions and the answers given, which has been all been very thorough, I would like to propose a motion that we support the officer recommendation to permit.
Thank you, Councillor Housel. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Jackson?
Yes, I mean, it's with great reluctance that I have to accept that these trees will have to be removed. But I'm sure that our officers will be watching the progress of the project with sufficient rigour, and so I'll second what Councillor Hansel has said, because on balance, I think it does have to be removed, this bridge.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Crossley.
Thank you very much. This is a very difficult one. When I was leader before, I was very instrumental in the Victoria Bridge restoration, and we took the decision to go for a full restoration on that because of the amount of historical significance about that bridge, particularly in the terms of the designer and the fact that that type of bridge failed in many other locations. In fact, as part of it, picking up on what Eleanor was saying about you don't know the full cost of what's happening, we had to do several things because, you know, we found out extra stuff as we did the refurbishment, and that's exactly what's happening on the Cleveland Bridge. So I can really sympathise with the fact that, you know, you're opening a can of worms with any of these old bridges once you start trying to restore them. And so therefore the question comes, is there any other, and that's why I asked my question, is there a halfway house to, you know, doing a partial restoration? And it seems to me that the historical significance of this bridge is nowhere near as important as any of the other bridges that we've been looking to refurbish and recover and thing. But it is an important part of Bath's history, of the River Avon's history. And so I think, as with Duncan and as with Eleanor, and having listened to the debate, and I have to say, this is one of those debates where I've actually really fundamentally changed my view during the course of the presentation. I usually read these things very thoroughly and come with well-formed views which are amendable, but in this case I've completely come to the other side of the argument, and I can really sympathise that there is no viable alternative other than the removal. But that is said with great sadness, because it is a part of our historical legacy. So I really hope that the interpretation board is very full. I hope it takes advantage of all modern technology so that you can get video clips and soundtracks and in there, rather than just being a simple board with writing on it, which wears out over time. You know, if you've got video clipped information clipped in there, then as new information comes, as history always reveals new information over time, then it can be easily updated, but give a full story of the bridge. And I think the historical interpretation must contain a full story of those changes that we've had through it. As regards the bats, for me, that is really important that we do a lot of that work before we get rid of the bat roosts that are there, and we look at how we do it. Obviously, the bat roosting, you know, a lot of bats have two roosts, so there'll be timing issues that go on with this demolition. And particularly if the demolition is going to take a long time, how does that go in with the bat annual cycle? So I would like a lot more work done on that. If the committee decides to pass it, I would like the officers to go away and make sure that they can give us a full explanation about how they're going to manage the bat problem. As regards the trees, it is a shame to lose fully grown trees, but fully grown trees will eventually reach the end of their life for a variety of means. I don't have the same concern that Eleanor expressed about the replacement of those trees. What I would like, though, is that if we can get fairly mature trees as part of the thing planted in your diagram that you put there, you show quite mature trees. Now, I realise replanting very mature trees is very difficult, but I think we need to look at not just putting whips in, but putting in something that's got already substantial growth. So it is with sadness, I think, really, but sometimes in planning, things just have to move on, and I think this, unfortunately, is one of those cases where things just have to move on, and so I will be voting for the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Crossley. Do you have any more contributions to the debate? Councillor Davis.
Thank you. Yes, I agree with the motion and what's there, and also the fact that there is Locksbrook Bridge not very far away, which will address one of the issues that some people have thought might have been an option here. So I feel, like Councillor Crossley said, asked about the trees for that very reason, but I do think this is a sensible option, and therefore I'm more than happy to support the motion that's on the table.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Councillor Bromley.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I too would support the motion, and partly actually looking at the bridge as it is, in fact, from the west side. It is in a mess. I mean, let's be honest, and disregarding all the, we've talked about the trees and the archaeology, and we will have to look at if remains are found that they are taken care of properly and documented. The benefits to opening up the towpath there and making an attractive area there for the towpath users is actually to be commended, because at the moment it's actually very, very congested around there, and it's a very heavily used towpath, and at the moment actually can get dangerously congested. So I think there are certain benefits to look at as well from this the taking down of the bridge.
Thank you. Bromley. Any more contributions to the debate before we move to the vote? No? So the motion we have on the table is to support the officer's recommendation proposed by Councillor Hounsell, seconded by Councillor Jackson. Councillor Simmons, I'm afraid you won't be able to vote. No, you already know that, thank you. So all those in favour? So that's unanimously supported, that motion. Thank you very much. We've been going for about an hour. If you'd like a comfort break while the officers switch over. 5 minutes, please. Right. Okay, so on to the second item on the mains plans list, which is Mill Farm, Compton Dando, and I'll invite the case officer to present her report. If you're ready, please.
Thank you, Chair. So items 2 and 3 relate to Mill Farm, located in Compton Dando. Item 2 on the agenda comprises a full application for the erection of a timber orangery, and item 3 is the accompanying listed building consent for the same proposal. Both will be shown in tandem for this presentation. Property is Grade 2 listed and is located within the Greenbelt. I do just also have a verbal update before I go into the presentation. There was an error made within the committee report where the parish council comments were missed from the response section of the report. Their response expressed support for the application. It was stated that there would be no adverse impact on the Greenbelt and no effect on neighbours' amenity, though it was noted that there may be additional light spill. So this is the site location plan on the left, and then an aerial imagery on the right. These are the existing elevations. So top left is the northern elevation. This is a section, so cut through of the property. And then at the bottom is the rear elevation, and then at the top there is the existing floor plans. And then the proposed site plan on the left, the orangery is highlighted in green, and then on the right is the proposed floor plan, so you can see the orangery there at the bottom. And then we've got the proposed elevation, so on the left again is that cut through from the north, and then on the bottom is the rear elevation. And this is just some site photos, so that's that rear elevation. And then just on the left a bit further back, showing the rear elevation where the orangery would go in that corner. And then on the right, that photo is the lighting's not very good, but that's the view with my back to the rear of the property, looking out towards the garden. And then beyond the fence is where the public footpath runs. So officer recommendation is to refuse listed building consent and planning permission for the reasons stated within the committee reports.
Thank you very much. We have one speaker on this one, which is Mr. Swan. Hopefully the microphone's working.
Is that working? Lovely. Hi. I've lived in Mill Farm since 2012 with my family, and my children are now the 5th generation of my wife's family to live in the house. We have enormous respect for the history and architecture of the property, and it's been in my wife's family for 150 years. My wife spent much of her childhood here. We fully understand that we're not just owners, but custodians of the period property. We took ownership of the house from my wife's grandmother before it fell into a significant state of disrepair, and we've carefully undertaken to repair and preserve the house, and we will continue to undertake sympathetic maintenance for many years to come to preserve the building, not just for our enjoyment, but for future generations of our family. As with all listed and period properties, they change and develop over time, and in the case of Mill Farm, it's now a residential family home, a far cry from its original industrial purpose. We would like to add a conservatory because our family's grown and we require a separate dining space, and we would like it to be lightweight, maximising light into the kitchen and making a link with a garden, which is only currently accessed through a narrow single door. We've chosen David Salisbury as we've seen the high quality of their work. We have addressed the following objections so far: the size and scale. The footprint we've now reduced by 45% than that originally proposed. It no longer projects past the surrounding walls, and the footprint is now comparable to the size of other rooms on the ground floor. The width of the opening from the house to conservatory and the loss of historic fabric. The proposed opening width has been reduced so that it's that of the existing kitchen window. There is clear evidence that this opening was previously a door which has been blocked in underneath the window. Therefore, the wall that would be removed under this window is not original, and therefore result in little to no historic fabric loss. as the conservatory can be considered temporary structure, we can retain and store the window and the stone underneath it, so that in future the conservatory, if it's removed, the window and the stone underneath it can be restored also. The conservatory connecting to the north elevation, so the elevation that most of the conservatory sits along, is actually a modern 21st century extension that we put a staircase in. The design of the windows and doors are in keeping with the property as viewed from the north elevation, and with the windows on the second and first floor above the orangery on the north elevation. I'd like to clarify also that the property was not built until after 1842, and so therefore cannot be considered to be earlier than 19th century. The public footpath is closer to our neighbours' attached property, and the closest point to Mill Farm, there is actually a heavy foliage section, so obscures views from the footpath to our property. And the proposed orangery can only be seen as the footpath moves significantly further away from the site. I very much hope that you'll support this application to add a high quality and temporary conservatory to Mill Farm to allow my family further enjoyment of this beautiful heritage asset. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swan. Questions to the officer? Anybody? Councillor Housel?
Thank you for the presentation. Now, in your report, you speak of, for example, the design of the fenestration still considered rather too grand. What you've shown in the presentation are plans and sort of layouts, but there are no pictures or nothing to convey what this would actually look like in place. And I just wonder if you've got anything like that could be shown to us.
The plans that I showed is what I had. There are joinery details which were supplied as part of this application. They are quite technical drawings, so I didn't include them in this presentation. That is the visual elevation that I have to hand, which I can leave.
Sorry, can you just talk to what you've got on the screen there and explain why you have used the phrase too grand?
Yeah, I think it's worth noting that the orangery in and of itself, if it wasn't attached to a listed building, is not a bad design. However, when we attach it to a listed building, with the extent of glazing and the addition of the roof lantern, it does create this grand appearance which detracts from the character of the listed building. Also, although its size has been reduced, and that is, that is welcomed. It hasn't unfortunately gone far enough. So its size in comparison to the other rooms is of a similar size, and that is considered to be too grand in that respect as well, detracting from the floor size of the room.
Thank you. Councillor Crossley?
Yes, thank you. If I can just refer you to something the speaker said, and just ask about the practicality of it, because we've had it before on a planning application. The applicant offered to retain any structure that he removes, such as doors and windowsills, etc., so that should a future application owner decide to get rid of the orangery, then there could be reinstatement. In your experience, how does that work with this retention of old material? And how would you ensure that offer was given? Should the committee reach a different decision to your conclusion?
I mean, in my experience, I haven't experienced that situation where something has been removed. However, I don't disagree that this is a light touch, and it would retain you know, the external walls mainly, there is that removal of the section to allow access into the conservatory. And once that is removed, that is a loss of historic fabric. Although that's not forming part of the refusal reason, that will be lost. And although it is a light touch approach, there will be some damage to the stonework of the elevations, given that it will need to be adjoined in some way. And I don't know what the technicalities would be to reinstate, but there probably would need to be some sort of repairs, even if they are minor, to the stonework to return it to its current form.
Okay, Councillor Cotterley. Councillor Jackson.
Oh, well, thanks very much, and thanks for your presentation. I've got a number of problems with it. I mean, not with your presentation, with the application. If you look at the elevations on the right-hand side, the west elevations, the adjacent property appears to have a modern door, and it's out of proportion to everywhere else. Seems to have what I'm sure is the original intention, small windows. After all, there was a sunlight tax probably when this cottage was built. That's the first problem, that door. Which means, because it's there, if it is modern, then it reduces the opposition which one can have to the extension because of where it's located. But looking at the extension, and the trouble is we haven't got very much to go on, that's saying to me, morning coffee. I mean, it's looking like a cafe frontage. There's so much glass there. It's almost like it's on the wrong side of the property. You know, if that were on the front and you were serving homemade cakes, it would be okay, but I can't quite see how it fits in the general courtyard design of those four properties. But perhaps the officer would like to. And I think the question about temporary materials is a very good one.
Sorry, Councillor Jackson, what was your question?
Question is, that door, is it modern or original that's on the left-hand side of the extension? And the second question is this an appropriate design for a rural courtyard as opposed to a shop front? Because it looks to me like there's an awful lot of glass there, but it's a bit difficult to tell on one sketch.
With regards to that door, I'm unsure whether that's original or not. That doesn't form part of this application. I mean, it is shown on the existing plan, so that it is there at present. And I don't know the history of that door, unfortunately, to say whether or not that is authorised. And then with regards to whether it's an appropriate design, it is officer opinion that it is not an appropriate design to be attached to this local this listed building in this location.
Okay, Councillor Jackson.
I did a double take when I saw the presentation, because we did one almost identical about 4 years ago in a different village. But it was different because you entered from the back from a car park. We did a site visit. But I can't remember what our decision was, so it's not relevant anyway.
Okay. So have you got one? Does one of the photos show that door? Thank you. It does look modern, doesn't it? Councillor McCabe.
Thank you, Chair. So am I right in thinking what I'm hearing from you is that whatever the design, there's always going to be some damage to the structure of the property, but in terms of the design, you're not happy with the design because it doesn't, and from what other members have said, the design doesn't seem to fit with that structure of buildings there, but you are now happy with the volume of what's being proposed. So it seems like, from what you're saying, that the applicant's nearly there, and certainly looking at the windows on this direction, the windows do seem far more fancy in the design, but they do seem to match the windows looking in the sideways direction, because they seem to be that little crisscross squares, whereas these ones on this side look like are they just a single piece of wood in the middle of the... Yeah, so that's it. So on the left one there, the new design matches those windows, but on the bottom right there, they certainly don't seem to match the windows.
Well, with regards to the windows, I think that's a fair assessment. I mean, on the whole, in its entirety, the windows are, the glazing in its entirety are considered to be, the expanse of glazing is too grand and is harmful in comparison to the extent of glazing which is on the listed building. And then with regards to the volume, I don't disagree that the reduction in volume is better, but I do not think it's gone far enough with regards to the proposal that we have in front of us.
Okay, Councillor McCabe, Councillor Bromley.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you, Danielle. I just wondered, following on from what Councillor McCabe was saying, so it's not the volume, it's still the volume in a sense that you object to as well, but also mainly it's the actual design. It's actually the fact it's a sort of orangery sort of conservatory design with a lot of glass. That's the main objection, is it?
I will make a distinction between a volume consideration because this site is in the green belt and that is the volume consideration, and it is not considered to be disproportionate, so it is acceptable in the green belt. But in terms of the listed building impact, it's mainly the footprint area which is comparable to the footprint of the internal rooms of the listed building, which are very similar, and some are slightly larger than some of the rooms. And then in terms of the design, it's really a combination of both the volume, the size of the footprint and the design. Together, they create this overly grand appearance. If just the footprint were to be reduced, we would still have the issue with the design and vice versa. So both would have to be amended.
Okay, Councillor McPhee.
Well, I suppose following that up, how much would they have to be amended?
I can't really give a number. It's a subjective assessment, which I do not have in front of me, unfortunately. It would be
10%?
I can't say a number, unfortunately.
Well, it's difficult for the man to work, isn't it, if we haven't got some kind of target?
Yeah, I get that. It is a subjective assessment, and without seeing on plan form what a reduction would look like, it is difficult to compare with the listed building and make that judgment determinatively.
Okay, Councillor Davis.
I think mine makes that. If you could show the floor plan again, because you talk about the footprint, and I think there. Thank you. If I talk to the microphone, I can't see the picture. But I think if we can look at the floor plan, because it's. Am I right in thinking you're thinking that the orangery, it's the size of that compared to, I think it says reception 1 and 2 there, from my memory now, because even I don't have eyes in the back of my head. So that's really where one of the concerns is, as well as the amount of glazing and the lantern and so on.
Yes, that's correct, and the kitchen as well, which is comparable with the size of the orangery.
Okay, any more questions for anyone? I have a question. The actual windows on the orangery, they're white, are they the same as the windows in the building? And the crossbars on the window, are they similar size to look at as the ones in the building?
So it's a timber orangery, and the glazing is timber 2. If the committee are minded to permit this application, I would suggest a condition be attached to secure the materials to be conditioned and considered further.
Okay, thank you. Do you have another question before we move to the debate, Councillor Jackson?
It's called an orangery, but if I understood the speaker correctly, he's actually looking for additional dining space. But I guess what the end use is isn't really relevant. Or am I wrong? I mean, should we be thinking of it as a conservatory?
As proposed and in the description of the development, it is proposed as an orangery. But like you say, the use isn't necessarily relevant. It can be used however the applicant wishes, should this be permitted.
Okay. Any more questions from anybody? No, so we can move to the debate. This is in Councillor Hounsell's ward, so I'll offer him to open the debate.
Thank you very much, Chair. A few thoughts. Firstly, very interesting to hear from the applicant, who comes across as very sincere about wanting to do the best for the property. We heard a bit of the family history, but just a reminder to everyone that personal circumstances have no part in planning. What's proposed may be here in 100 years' time. Who knows? The report that we've been provided is very, very clear, and it all comes down to the duty that we have. If I can just repeat it, it's on page 49, and that is to consider whether to grant planning permission, to consider whether it affects the listed building or its setting, and to have special regard to the desirability of preserving the building or its setting. So it's not just thinking about it, but special regard. The parish council has supported this, but in planning law, their views only have to be noted, but we have a duty to give special regard to the effect on the listed building. There are two criticisms. One is the size, the other is the design. There's obviously an element of subjectivity to this. Do we consider that it does preserve and enhance the listed building and its setting? So I'm not going to propose a motion at this stage. I do have a view in my mind, what I think, but as there is an element of subjectivity here, I'd like to hear from others as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hounsell. Councillor McCabe.
Thank you, Chair. I think to boil down my assessment to a nugget, I think what the applicant has done is designed a beautiful orangery. And I fear that it hasn't been designed with the proportions of the existing building in mind. I think the officer is right on the design. I think it doesn't sit well with the building. If the design had sat better with the building, I might have been persuaded on volume. But both together, I think that it's still looking slightly too big, and I would be uncomfortable with the design. So I will propose that we accept the officer's recommendation, because I think we've also given enough clues to the applicant about where they can go next. So I've gone off. I would propose a motion to support the officer's recommendation.
Okay, does anybody want to second that? Councillor Jackson?
Yes, I was going to actually propose the motion because I think the officer has got it right, and this is not an appropriate. I don't have so much of a problem with the volume of it, but rather it's just the wrong thing in the wrong location, and so I'm happy to second.
Councillor Crossley.
Thank you very much. So I reach a different conclusion from the officers and Matt and Eleanor. I think when you're looking at listed buildings and you're adding extensions onto it, it's sometimes with history and looking back, what you want is not something that mirrors what's there, but something that challenges and extends and gives new breath of life for the time. Because the most important thing about preserving old buildings is that people live in them and want to live in them and stay living in them and then adapt them and as they changing circumstances. And I would just refer you back to a very controversial application that we had 3 decades ago, which was the extension to the Holborn, which completely divided the community 50-50 between those who wanted to see something that was completely different added to the building and those that wanted it to mirror and ape what was currently there. And I think we, in a sense, on a smaller scale, we've got something similar here. Do you want an extension that just looks as though it's 150 years old, or do you want something that it is of its time and is new? And if you look at those, when we had the pictures, the facades, in a sense, have already been severely modified with those plastic double glazing white windows that are in there. So the building has changed quite significantly in terms of its visual appearance and outlook. So I reach a different conclusion from the officers and Matt and Eleanor, and I personally will think this is permissible, so I shall vote against the motion on the table.
Thank you, Councillor Crossley. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. I mean, I must admit, when I read the report, I was quite concerned about the use of the word grands, but having seen the presentation and from the limited pictures we have available, I think it's probably quite an appropriate use of the words, and so I'll certainly be supporting the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Jackson.
I'm sorry this is not meant personally about what Councillor Crossley has just said, but I think the Holborn Museum extension is the most unfortunate comparison, because it completely destroyed the architect Bloomfield's concept of walking into the garden as you came down the staircase. And I voted against it then, and when we went on the annual tour to see how it had worked out, in the meantime the colour of the materials have been changed. A lot of Alderman Kew, for instance, thought we'd made a mistake, and I wouldn't want to have a similar mistake made here by putting in something that's so out of character.
Thank you. Councillor Bromley.
Thank you. Yes, yes, thank you. I appreciate Councillor Crossley's comments about the Holborn Museum. I mean, in one sense, I mean, I do actually like it, so that's sort of probably irrelevant. But that's in a city, and I do feel we're looking at a different setting here. We're looking at a very sort of very rural setting, and I think I think it is out of keeping with the original building. It detracts from the character of a mid-19th century farmhouse, and I will be supporting the motion for that reason.
Thank you. Do we have any more contributions to the debate before we go to the vote? Councillor Hansel.
Right, after hearing what everybody's had to say, I think I need to be clear about what I think. I think what Councillor Crossley, the analogy is probably not correct, because there were public benefits to, maybe arguable, but to the scheme that he talks about. But this is a private benefit. My feeling is that what's proposed is possibly too large, but like Councillor McCabe, I would have been swayed by if I thought the design was suitable, but actually I do not think this design is appropriate. It just doesn't seem to fit to me. So hopefully the applicant may go away and consider whatever the outcome is today, and maybe consider either a smaller footprint, but more pertinently a different design. I think the amount of glass, the number of windows, and so on, it just doesn't look right to me. And we do have to have a special regard to the desirability of preserving the setting of a listed building. It's a duty that we must carry out. So I will be voting with the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hansel. Any more contributions before we go to the vote? No? So the motion we have on the table is to support the officer's recommendation proposed by Councillor McCabe, seconded by Councillor Jackson. All those in favour? 9 in favour and those against? 1, so that is carried. There were no abstentions. Have we got an abstention, sorry? Oh, right, yeah, thank you for reminding me. I always forget. Councillor McCabe and Jackson, are you happy to do the same for the listed building application?
Yes, Chair.
And Councillor Jackson. Okay, thank you. So all those in favour of the listed buildings motion? 9 and again. And abstentions, we have 1. So that is carried. Thank you. So it's 12:35. We finish the morning's applications now. If everybody can make sure they're back promptly for, well, 1:55, please. Yes, Councillor Crossley.
I realise we've got a speaker for this afternoon at 2, so that we can't consider the planning application. But could we at least finish off the rest of the agenda? So this afternoon when we come back, all we've got is the one planning application. That's my proposal to you.
That's fine by me. Is everybody else happy with that? Yeah, okay, we can do that. I've got no problem with that. We're going to stay and do the rest of the agenda. Okay, so appeals report, item 9. Any questions or comments on the appeals report? No? Members are asked to note the report. Quarterly performance report covering period 1st of April to 30th of June.
Right. Okay, I can't find it quickly, but the appeal by Resourceful Earth, it's going to hearing in front of independent inspector. I just want to ask the question. I know that Baines is having legal representation to support its case. Is that legal representation a practicing barrister?
Perhaps our senior planning officer or legal officer could answer that.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we've engaged the services of a barrister for the public inquiry. Yeah. I couldn't tell you the name of the barrister.
Right, it's the Resourceful Earth one, which is just off of Charlton Road in Keynsham, on the edge of Keynsham. Can you find the reference there? Sorry. We had a site visit. You were on the site visit, I remember.
That's enough information, is it?
Finish that one. I would just like to compliment the officer on the fact that the 3 Ruskin Road appeal, the Pinge judgment came through yesterday and the applicant has lost, which means that one beautiful mature tree can now flourish happily. But I would really like to thank the team who put the work in to uphold the views of Westfield Parish Council and saved a tree.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Nothing else on the appeals report? Okay, quarterly performance report, same thing. Councillor Crossley.
I think, once again, I think the committee should be commending our staff and our teams. Once again, appeals dismissed 15%. We've got a very high percentage of the applications that are being processed. Again, I think our thanks to all the staff involved, and it shows the robustness of the processes that we have in this council.
Thank you, Councillor McCabe. McPhee, sorry. Your microphone's not on.
If I look on page 77, the enforcement investigations, I think we should say that we seem to be in trouble if we look at the number that we are launching, the number that we've got in hand in 2021, and then we can see that the investigations in hand have gone up by just under 100, and the number of investigations closed is 60 instead of 137. So, and I wonder how many staff do we actually have looking at this payload here, because it seems like we're sinking into something where we're just getting more and more in hand and we're not getting through them.
Okay, thanks, Query. I'll pass the Senior Planning Officer. I mean, I know the enforcement team have been actively recruiting, and yes, they are under stress. It's very difficult to get staff, not least because I have to say the attitude to the public, to some of the people that work in that department, is a very, very stressful job. But I'll pass the Senior Planning Officer for further comment.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Councillor McPhee is right to focus on staffing. That's been the main issue in the enforcement team over the last 6 months to a year, really. The team, there's been a lot of people leave, which has left some vacancies, and obviously it takes time. Even if the vacancies are advertised immediately, there's a lead-in time to fill those posts. So that's been part of the issue, and alongside that, the number of cases has risen dramatically. So in terms of resolving or trying to resolve that issue, there's been a lot of recruitment recently. As the Chair says, all of the posts in the enforcement team are now filled. So really, we're quite optimistic that the team are going to be able to work through that backlog of cases.
Councillor McPhee?
Can I just check that this is enforcement of planning, because there's two aspects of enforcement, aren't there? There's the enforcement of dust and other things in the air. Are we talking just about planning here?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is purely planning enforcement. So this is where there are breaches of planning control or alleged breaches of planning control.
Right. Thank you very much.
Councillor Hansel?
Just following up on the same point, really. At the last parishes liaison meeting, which I wasn't able to attend because it clashed with a Corston Parish Council meeting in my ward, but I've heard that the issues to do with planning enforcement was a very significant issue raised at the parish's liaison meeting. There was discontent or concern across all the parishes. Now, I know recently the number of planning enforcement officers was down to 2 across the whole of Baines. Can you give a number now? How many now are in post?
Thank you, Chair. Off the top of my head, there are 3 planning enforcement officers and an apprentice as well, and then the planning enforcement manager. And members may be aware, the committee may be aware that he's leaving, and we're currently advertising for that post at the moment. But he's still in post at the moment.
Councillor Hansel?
Can you just tell us when the head of planning and enforcement is expected to leave? What's the timescale for that?
Thank you, Chair. I don't have an exact date, but I believe it's the end of the summer, so September-ish, I believe.
Thank you. Any more questions on the performance report? Councillor Jackson.
As one of the hot spots for trouble in enforcement, my ward, I would like to thank the senior officer who is, I'm glad to say, is not leaving the council. He's moving into a different department, but Richard Stott has been really a tower of strength in the very many very difficult enforcement issues in Radstock Westfield. And unfortunately, we've lost 2 other senior officers who knew the ground very thoroughly, because the new guys, who I think have been in post for about 3 weeks now, appear to be, I'm sure they're working very hard, but like you're saying, until you actually know the terrain and know where things are problematic and the long-standing sores. I mean, we've got enforcement issues in Radstock going back to 2014, which we're continually working on, but, you know, it's difficult for them, and The Ruskin Road one, by the way, was an enforcement issue originally, so it's come to a very satisfactory conclusion. Richard would say, if he was here, that these figures on the top of page 77, part of it reflects the fact that negotiation is always the preferred option, and so we do see a reduction in cases where there's just been an agreement and the person concerned has complied. And I won't say everything's sweetness and light, that's obviously not. However, the other thing that's emerged is that the changed working arrangements for the planning department are causing some some inconvenience. And this is why Westfield Parish Council have offered they've got spare office space in their offices. Should an enforcement officer or any other planning officer want a bit of desk space, we're there for you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jackson. I'm sure Richard will be pleased to hear that vote of confidence. I believe the planning teams now have space in Keynsham, which so they can all get together, which I'm sure they'll be very pleased about. Okay, well, thank you for that. I'm sure the Senior Planning Officer will make a note of that. Yeah, and I say again, these guys, all of the team, do a really, really difficult job, and we all appreciate what they do. So unless there are any more comments on that, I think that's the rest of the agenda done, apart from the date of next meeting and site visits, which we won't be sure of until after this afternoon's case. So if you could all be back at your desk just before 2, please. Thank you. Good afternoon. Welcome back, everyone. Just one case to review this afternoon, which is Windy Ridge, Chew Magna. So we have the officer in place, so if you'd like to do your presentation whenever you're ready, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As you said, this application relates to Windy Ridge, which is located within the hamlet of Newtown in Chew Magna. It's a householder application for the repair of historic cottages, demolition of modern extensions and garage, and the erection of new extensions. So as you can see from the location plan, the site's located in a fairly small hamlet. It's basically in the open countryside. The rear of the site is open to long distance views. So a couple of site photos, just giving a bit of context. The host dwelling is in the middle of both of these shots, which are taken from the road. As you can see, although the building is of some age, there's been a number of additions which have been added, so its historic character is not particularly evident. These photos give a bit more context to the site. The picture on the left shows the view of the property as approached from the east. It's at the end of the hamlet, so is particularly visible on approach. And the second photo is taken while transiting through the hamlet. Just gives a bit of an idea of the kind of vernacular within which it's set, which is dwellings of a traditional form, render and stonework. So moving on to proposed elevations, in these slides the existing elevations are at the top of the screen and the proposed are at the bottom. So as you can see, the existing extensions are being stripped away so that the historic core is revealed, and a two-story contemporary rear extension is being proposed. The site is within the green belt. However, in this instance, officers feel that very special circumstances have been demonstrated because the volume of the additions is no greater than what's being removed. So there's no net gain of volume on the site. Where concern does lie is that in removing the existing additions, it creates a very kind of small, intimate form of the cottages. It's worth mentioning that they are not considered to be heritage assets, either designated or undesignated. And the concern really lies in the scale of the rear additions relative to the traditional form on the front of the property. It's felt that in terms of their scale, which is obviously, as you can tell from that block plan, is considerably deeper and wider than the front element, that those would dominate the building and have an awkward relationship. This would be particularly kind of prominent within the landscape. We've had a fair bit of discussion on the application, and we've kind of had numerous kind of iterations of the scheme and amendments made, but unfortunately none of these have brought the scheme to a point of acceptability, and it's for this reason that the officer's recommendation is to refuse.
Okay, thank you very much. We have two speakers on this one. If I can ask Richard Webb to come up to the front. Hello. When you're ready, if you'd like to just switch your microphone on and start.
Is that okay? Everyone hear me okay? My name's Richard Webb. Myself and my wife bought the property 2 years ago, basically with the view to make it a family home and bring her closer to the business, my local tree surgery business within Chew Magna. And we just feel that the existing layout of the house and the separate annex just doesn't work for us as a family home. We submitted the planning application back in July 2021. Our architect addressed the planning officer's concerns by stepping the extension fully into the hillside, thus lowering the impact on the landscape and revealing more of the core cottage. The main points for the officer's recommendation for the refusal relate to the character and appearance. We strongly disagree with the officer's assessment for several reasons. The existing house has no architectural merit, poor environmental accreditations, and the layout cannot easily converted into a family home. We feel these negative aspects are all relevant and should be given sufficient weight in judging of the decision. The proposal will remove all inappropriate modern additions to reveal the core cottage that will be which will have traditional windows, doors, roof, and rendered details returned. The proposal of the extension at the rear of the property is set back from the road and lower than the existing extensions. We believe will provide a significant planning gain for the local streetscape by making the core cottage dominant. When viewed from the footpath in the valley, the existing house dominant skyline development with a long ridgeline. The proposal will reduce the existing skyline development and sets the extension in and down into the natural slope. The proposed tree planting and fully developed garden design, the house will over time integrate into the landscape, dramatically increasing the biodiversity and mature to be in harmony with the neighbouring gardens. Other reasons for refusal relate to the siting and scale, massing, and materials. The proposed siting and extension at the rear of the property is logical and resolves the layout, flow, and orientation of the house. Stepping the extension down into the hillside reduces the house's visual impact from both the road and the valley. It's worth noting that the proposed extensions have smaller volume than the existing extensions and engulf less of the original cottage from the eaves of the cottage and reveal not compromise as existing.
Excuse me, sorry, I need you to sum up because you've had your 3 minutes. Sorry. Thank you. And could we have Councillor Pritchard, please?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm here today to support this application for an extension to the house known as Windy Ridge within my ward. This development is set in a small hamlet of Newtown within the parish of Chew Magna and set within the Green Belt. All along the road from the A368 to Morlidge Lane, there are different types of buildings from modern bungalows to older cottages. Essentially, this is two small cottages from the 1800s knocked into one cottage. There are modern extensions in a number of areas, all of which have planning permission. The extensions consist of a small front porch and at the back, a small back porch and a large extension together with a garage. All of these current extensions detract from the sense of the original cottages and sit proud in the landscape. They are not harmonious, rather stuck in a haphazard way. Even the road scene at the cottage has been changed with an additional front porch. The application proposes to decrease the volume of the extensions and the garage. The proposed replacement for the different extensions will sit far lower in the landscape than the current extensions. The hazel hedge to the side of the property will be properly layered in order to continue to provide a good ecological environment for diverse wildlife. This hedge will grow and screen the buildings from the southern sides, so to a degree it will soften the landscape. From the east, the extension will look as if it's one building rather than two separate structures that is lower in the landscape to the original cottage. In addition, the cottage is preserved more in keeping as it was when it was two cottages, than with the randomly positioned porches and extension that are trying to be part of the cottage, where the new extension rather than the extension that they currently in situ. Indeed, the parish council comments include building a connected pair of carefully planned contemporary units on the falling gradient of the curtilage seems to be an innovative and effective solution that would provide a practical family dwelling that fits unobtrusively into its rural setting while conserving the historic building's heritage. I'd like to add my support for these comments and point out that the proposed extension will not dominate the original building as much as the current extensions, being lower in the landscape, and will indeed enhance the cottage. I would therefore request that you permit this development. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pritchard. Questions to the officer? Do you have any? No? Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Chair. There was a reference to the view from a public footpath, but we didn't. I wondered if there was a slide of that.
I don't have any pictures from the public footpath in the presentation, but they were included in the applicant's design and access statement on the file.
Councillor Bromley.
Thank you, Chair. So this is one extension, is it, or is it two separate extensions with a sort of sloping roof on each?
This is probably the best elevation to show the proposal. So the core of the cottage is going to be revealed at the front, and then there's going to be two-story additions which are linked by glazed elements at the rear, and then those are going to step down. There's a single-story lean-to on the rear of them. So it is one extension, but it can kind of be read as two separate elements.
Thank you. So the glazed extension, is that sort of on, it's difficult to see, is that sort of like just that bit in the middle there, that's glass, is it, basically?
Yeah, so in between both of those pitched roof two-story bits with the mono-pitch roof, there's going to be a glazed link between each of those.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Councillor Hughes?
Thank you. I just, when you showed us the pictures earlier, you showed them from one direction. Do you have any pictures that show us the street scene for the rest of the houses in this group?
Would you like, so these, because of the bend of the road, the picture on the left is obviously taken as you enter the village or the hamlet from the east. Picture on the right there is taken partially through the hamlet just after the Pony and Trap. These pictures here, so the one on the right is taken from the east. The one on the left is taken from just beside that pink dwelling house, which really is only kind of tens of meters up the road from the picture on the right-hand side there, just around the corner.
It's just that Councillor Pritchard seemed to imply that there was a huge variation in the types of property in this location. And I can only see two buildings that look very similar, a pink one and a cream-coloured one.
I think Councillor Pritchard may have been referring to other dwelling houses which are sited within the wider vicinity, kind of in this area. Apart from this hamlet, there is a fairly dispersed layout of dwellings throughout the surrounding context. There is variation in those, but they're not within this hamlet.
Okay. Any more questions? Councillor Bromley, you have another one?
Thank you. So the location is very visible. Obviously it's on a ridge, so it's actually very visible from a wide area, is it? This location.
Yeah, so I'll just flick through the pictures again. So on this slide on the left, you can see the road is going along kind of very close to the top of the hill. The land falls away towards the north into a valley. There's a number of public footpaths within that valley from which the dwelling can be viewed. The landscape officer did note that it was a highly sensitive location in terms of potential visual impact. You can see here the pictures kind of in the background to the dwelling, the kind of surrounding landscape which falls away behind the dwelling. In terms of where it is in a fairly prominent location. Comments were kind of made saying that the existing additions are more kind of prominent, but in my view, these form part of the dwelling as it is now. It hasn't been a simple kind of farm worker's cottage for a very long time, and just to reiterate, it isn't considered to be a heritage asset, whether it's designated or undesignated, just because there's been so much alteration to the cottage. As it is, it sits fairly unoffensively within the hamlet and the wider landscape.
Anybody else got any questions? So can I, whilst I think the other picture that you've got, the one that, yeah, that one. So the one on the left, I think the footpath that was mentioned in the notes, that has that view, doesn't it? It comes up towards the road.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Okay, so if there's no more questions, who would like to open the debate? Councillor McCabe.
I find this quite a tricky one. I think, trying to reveal the original cottage is a highly laudable sort of effort to go in. But of course, the problem you then land yourself in is that everything else is going to be bigger than the original building, which is kind of contrary to what we're trying to do in terms of extensions being subservient to the original building. But it is also quite clear that they have got a lot of volume to play with. And as the officer said, there is no volume increase, but you can't get away. I really struggle to get away from the fact that lowest element is bigger in itself than the original building, even though it's set down the hill and it is lower. But it's wider it's longer than the original building, and you can see it in that front view. You can see it extending off to the side in very modern materials. They make the point that obviously an older building like this is hard to heat. We all know that. Those of us who live in stone buildings. So this reuse of the current volume that they have in this modern way could actually make a very modern and climate-friendly accommodation. So part of me wants to part of me wants to say yes, well done, but another part of me is struggling with this thing that actually, by taking all this volume and making it an obvious extension off the back of the original building, you've built something that's much larger than the original building. But you know, apparently all that volume was agreed to under planning applications, so they're entitled to it. Yeah, but I'm interested to hear what other people think.
Thanks, Councillor McCabe. Councillor Davis.
I don't think I'm much out there because I'm exactly the same. I can see the advantages of the idea, but I'm not overly happy with the bits. I can see taking it down is going to have less impact in some areas, but I'm not sure that I actually really like the design as it is at the moment. So I don't think my help is at all there, Councillor McCabe, because I'm like you, actually quite confused as to what to do. I can see the principle and the idea seems to be right, but I'm not sure this is the right solution. So yeah, like you, wait and see what others say.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Councillor Crossley.
Well, I think this is an imaginative solution, actually, to take a building that has existing permissions and use that volume to justify a radically different solution to the way that volume is distributed. So we always get into a tiz about these small cottages in the countryside. And, you know, we've raised it several times that, you know, a person with a mansion can have a small extension which is bigger than half the cottages in his neighbouring area. And yet the neighbouring area, they want a small room put on, and it's over 30% of the extension, so we refuse it. So but this one, we've already got the volume. The volume is there, so there is no planning issue in terms of volume. All we've got is a distribution of that volume. And so what he's doing is he's cutting away a lot of piecemeal additions, and I'm delighted to see that front extension's gone, and reallocating them to the back so that from the street scene point of view, as you drive along, you see something that's more akin to the original cottage. Now, obviously, from other views, you'll see the extensions going backwards. But from my perspective, I think this is an imaginative redistribution of volume that he has got through valid planning permissions over time, and I think it, on balance, it improves the distribution of that volume and improves the setting of this building in its landscape. I'm quite happy not to move anything at the moment if you want further debate, but from my perspective, I reach a different conclusion from the officer on this.
Thank you, Councillor Crossley. Any more thoughts on the committee? Councillor Jackson.
Well, I think in many ways this is like the previous application that we looked at, except, of course, that it's not a listed building. I'm sorry, excuse me. And it's not a non-listed heritage building, apparently, although I would have read it as a sort of heritage person. I mean, building. It's the common vernacular for agricultural workers. The fact that it's, you know, we're in a different world now, and the fact there's no bus stop for miles doesn't matter anymore. But I don't really think, I'm trying to convince myself, because it is an imaginative design, Councillor Crossley's right there. I'm trying to convince myself, though, that it's right in this location. And what I'm not really happy about is the fact we've only got very limited views, and I don't know the area at all. So half of me would like to propose a site visit. I'm not sure how popular that would be, because other members may feel more comfortable of knowing something about this location. And particularly, it's often a matter of gradients, and from the presentation, I really haven't got a sense of whether the land is falling away, whether there's a popular picnic spot at the bottom of the footpath or anything.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Councillor Hughes, did you have your hand up?
Sorry, yes, I think actually most of the comments I wanted to make have been covered, but I do I don't have a problem with the volume on this. I do wonder whether the design fits in this location. And yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that a site visit might help. I'm also would like perhaps I'm still not quite sure I fully understand the materials being used on the extension and how they fit with the original building at the front.
Councillor McPhee.
Not being able to visualise what it's going to look like from the footpath looking up is a difficult one for me to make a call. I'm not sure if the site visit is going to help that, but the site visit and something that maybe we ask the officer to produce something that shows us what it's going to look like, because that's the crucial view, isn't it? It's from the footpath going back up. If we knew what that looked like and we were all happy with it, we would be saying fine. I have no idea really what it's going to look like.
Councillor Davis.
Yes, no, it is. In the design and access statement, there's some things, I don't know if the officer is able to pull up that and use there, because there are some clear pictures there in the design and access statement, which may help one or two people look at the views, but I'm not sure that an officer can pull that up during the presentation. But that might just help.
I think he's just having a look, see if you can do that. Councillor Hounsell, do you want to speak while the officer's doing that?
No, because actually I was going to make the same point as Councillor McPhee said, that a site visit may not necessarily help because it's very hard to visualise what this would look like when the extension's there, and hopefully these pictures will help.
Okay, Councillor Bromley.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at these. I know they're these linked extensions, but I just look very incongruous to me, really. That's too sort of slope. I mean, from any further. I mean, it's a glazed sort of link extend a link bit in the middle. From a distance, it would look just like two separate extensions with a sort of a sloping roof. I don't know. It just looks very incongruous in that setting, really, and with a sort of in that prominent location.
Thank you. Right, we'll just, unless anybody else got anything they want to say, we'll just let the officer get these pictures up.
So we've got a couple of artists' representations which we can show if you'd like that, and we can also look at the photographs within the design and access statement. Shall we do both? So this is the existing view from the footpath to the east. This is the proposed view from the footpath to the east. The architects put together some landscape visual models. So these show the proposed development along with the landscaping scheme from various viewpoints. The top left is taken from the southwest. Top right is taken from pretty much directly south. The bottom left visual is taken from the northeast, which is fairly representative of where one of the footpaths is. And the next one, let's see where that's taken from. That one is from the footpath to the east, so there's a bit of tree screening which is proposed. I'll just find the design and access statement which shows the existing pictures. So this photograph's taken facing kind of up the hill from the east. So you can see at the minute that the building kind of, the extensions that have been added to that over time. There's a few others. The picture in the top left is taken from the garden of the dwelling house. The images in the centre and the right are taken from the public footprint. My apologies, the picture in the right is taken from the garden of the dwelling house.
Could you go back to the diagram that showed what's proposed from the footpath?
Which one's that? Is that the elevation drawing or a model?
Was that the model, or there was a artist's impression? One of the first things you got up, I think. Yeah, I'm aware of that. We can't use that here, I'm afraid. Sorry. Right, did you want to make your comment now? Yeah, so you'll have to wait until I've turned my mic off and then yours will come on.
Okay, thank you. Right, that troubles me because I'm happy with the principle of reusing the available volume, but just looking at that, I mean, in a previous planning application, Councillor Jackson said an extension looked a little bit like an entrance to a coffee shop. This makes me think of, you know, a heritage railway shed. It just doesn't look appropriate in that context. You know, the two sections and then the join, and I guess the materials. So I've got nothing against the principle, but just that design to me doesn't seem appropriate in the setting, particularly when it's in such a significant rural setting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hounsell. Is that a hand up, Councillor Jackson?
Well, I think I'm another one who's changed their view, having seen the presentation, but I'm particularly having seen, we don't need a site visit, I think, now. We've had a pretty good idea of the various aspects looking at the property, and in particular, I think this one's very significant, but also there was a picture that gave you an idea of the whole settlement as a sort of rural farm type of thing. And I'm not sure about the heritage steam train, but I did think Doctor Who. I mean, they're just not appropriate in that context. The actual bulk I wouldn't have a problem with, except that I think the officer's absolutely right. It should be more subservient to the main building, and it's not. It's a statement on its own, whatever it might be. So I'm going to propose that we accept the officer's recommendation and refuse the application.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Simmons? Thank you. Councillor McPhee, you want to speak?
All I wondered was, taking Councillor Hounsell's comments, was if we change the material in which those two buildings were constructed so that they were closer to what was the original cottage, would that be a proposal that one could consider? Because there's a lot of work there, the volume's there, as we've said. I think what we're objecting to, we're finding that actual material a little clashing. So, yeah. Wondering if we could delegate to permit to have a different material there.
Okay, well, we'll see how this current motion goes when we vote, and if it fails, then you could certainly put that forward. Councillor McCabe?
I'm not sure that we'd be putting the officer in a very comfortable position to try and find a material that the committee might like. When you see the photograph of the building as it currently is on the top of the hill, it's massive and it sticks out like a sore thumb. It's been so extended. The tricky bit is trying to visualize what that would look like from a distance with that small tiled top and then these two grey roofs, and whether that's going to be less impactful in that view or more impactful. Now, I completely agree that is not a design material that I would choose, but it's not a listed building. And whilst the officer's objection was that the proposed development would still cause unacceptable harm to the character, appearance of the existing dwelling, the site and its wider setting, I disagree with that. I think that the development wouldn't do that. I'm not entirely sure that those materials would actually not still cause some harm to the site and the dwelling, wider setting. But I don't think it's significant harm. So I would be minded to not go with the officer's recommendation, and I would be minded to allow this to go ahead.
Thank you. Any more contributions before we go to the vote? Councillor Hughes, then Councillor Jackson.
Sorry, I just want to say, I mean, from all the different images we've seen, I still don't feel that I'm 100% clear what this will actually look like in real life. We've seen renders, we've seen some very sort of picturesque artist impressions, but I'm still not comfortable. I really know what this is going to look like. I mean, the renders we saw earlier seem to have trees or clouds in front of them, which it's not saying look at this as a good design. It's saying don't worry about design because it's going to be obscured by all these trees. So at this point, I'm really not comfortable. I really fully understand what this is going to look like and what the impact will be.
Okay, do we have any more? Oh, sorry, Councillor Jackson, I do beg your pardon. You did have your hand up. Carry on.
I think there's a Chew Valley neighbourhood plan. Or I'm fairly sure this area is covered by a neighbourhood plan. And I would have thought that there would have been some kind of design code covering this sort of situation where we've got a very sharp contrast between the traditional rural setting of many of the buildings and this sort of aircraft hangar type of thing with, I think what we're all agreed, the materials are not appropriate. And I do think what the officer has put here is absolutely sums it up. The contemporary design of the link additions in contrast with the traditional and modest form of the original element will make the rear elements appear more dominant, and this I think is where we've got a crucial point, that the extensions would dominate what you see. So you wouldn't say, oh, what a lovely cottage, what an interesting extension. You just say, oh, goodness me, that's rather a large extension, even though it's not, and I fully accept that it is within the bounds of what you're allowed to do in volume. It's just the design makes it look bigger than it actually is. And as the officer says, consequently it will draw more attention to the unsuitable design and result in greater overall harm to the character and appearance of the street scene and the wider landscape. And that, I think, is the other crucial bit. So I'm sticking to my guns. I hope you will refuse this, because the applicant can always come in with a revised design, which we might think could hit the nail on the head. We might not, though.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Councillor Bromley, then I think we'll probably move to a vote.
Even if you change the materials, I still think the whole design is just overbearing and in its location, and just that the general design is overwhelming, and as regards to the main house, I would certainly support the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Bromley. So I'd like to move to the vote if nobody else has got anything desperate they need to say. So the motion we have on the table is to support the officer's recommendation proposed by Councillor Jackson and seconded by Councillor McPhee. Although Councillor Simmons, I do beg your pardon. All those in favour? I think we have 8. And those against? Another 2, so that's... Well, that would be right, wouldn't it? 10. 8 for and 2 against. That's the total. So that is carried. Thank you. Okay. So, yeah, sorry, just to be clear, the officer's recommendation to refuse has been supported, but I hope you'll consider talking to the officer and coming back with something slightly different. So we've covered everything else pretty much on the agenda. We have no site visits at the moment. So the next meeting will take place on Wednesday, 24th of August. So if we have no further business, I'll close the meeting. Thank you, everybody.